Greetings everyone and welcome in today's PCB webinar. My name is Gzim and I am the Portfolio Manager for Security at PCB. Today I will be as an organizer of this webinar and I hope we will have an interactive webinar with all the questions and your comments. For your information, I assume you all know that PCB organizes daily webinars on our 5 portfolios, and every week we organize a webinar on security portfolio covering different topics and areas. I will take this opportunity to inform you that we will organize a training event from June 27th to July 1st on Stockholm, Sweden, with the topic Advanced Auditing Techniques. You can find more information on our website or by writing at event2016@pcb.com. Okay, we will get back to our presentation. In this webinar, we will hear about the topic Agile Security, Recalibrating Information Security for Agile Development Projects. This webinar will be presented from two of our presenters, Mr. Arthur Donkers, who is PCP trainers, and Pascal de Koning. Mr. Donker is an experienced security consultant working and has many years of experience on information security. Among many, he holds a certification on ISO 27001, 27005 and ISO 31000. Also, Mr. Koning is qualified as information security professional and cybersecurity with wide experience as consultant. Among many, he holds a CISSP qualification and currently working as the chairman of security service at the Open Group and the SABSA Institute. We hope this webinar helps you understand the importance of Agile security. If you have any question, you can write them at any time in question box in right-hand control panel, or you can use the option to raise your hand and we will answer to all of them accordingly. Please, Arthur, you may continue.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Gazim. Welcome, everybody. My name is Arthur Donkers. I have done a lot of projects together with Pascal. And in a lot of projects, we encountered a agile development approach and agile project management styles and all that kind of quickly changing and quickly moving developments. And we were always the guys who had to fit in information security in that agile development. So what we've done, we've collected our mutual or our combined experiences and the things that we encountered, and we hope that we can help you find a solution if you get into the same situation as we have encountered. So if you got any questions later, or if you want to have a copy of the white paper Pascal and I are writing, please don't hesitate to send me or Pascal an email and we will get back to you. I would like to ask you to save your questions until the end of this webinar, because some of the questions may be answered during the webinar, and we can at the end we can collect all the questions and focus on them. So let's get started. What is this all about? Well, it's about how to fit the information security requirement, risk management, and all those steps within the PDCA cycle into an agile approach. We will shortly focus on what Agile is. There are many forms of Agile, so we limited ourselves to the most obvious forms of Agile management, Agile security management, and we will provide you with some of the solutions that we implemented to at least get an alignment between Agile and information security. We split up the presentation in 2 parts. I'm part of the problem, as I say, so I will address the problems that we encountered with you, and Pascal is part of the solution, and he will show you the solutions that we developed to get everything going. So why did we bother, or why did we wrote a white paper and made this webinar? We see a trend in the market that system and application development is moving towards an agile and a continuous delivery model. So the old waterfall model is no longer used, or is used less and less, and companies, big companies, small companies are more doing a continuous delivery of new versions of their product with added functionality and added features. So that's what we encountered. And can information security, as we know it currently, and referring to standards like the ISO standard, can we keep up with that new development model, that continuous delivery model, or are we trailing after the fact? That is the question that we had to ask ourselves in a few of those projects. So do we still have the old and reliable ISO 27001 framework available, or do we need to do things differently? That was one of the main questions that we had to ask ourselves. And there's a bit of a personal vendetta of mine, or a personal windmill, if you may call it. I encounter a lot of cyber in all kinds of communications, but I'm still not sure what people mean by that. So I'm trying to avoid the word cyber here in this presentation, and also the word architecture. So please be careful with this. As I said, it's not yet this is a work in progress. We are finding things out as we go along as well. So it's not a complete one-stop shop yet, or a complete method or methodology of applying information security in an agile environment. We are getting there slowly but surely. So we just want to address today the main assumptions and errors in those assumptions that we encountered in the projects. And we were sometimes amazed about how both security look at development and development looks at security. So hence the double face palm that we sometimes had to pull to hide our amazement. Some issues with the infosec that we encountered that don't fit into that agile model. A lot of the frameworks and a lot of the tools that we use are still based on a sort of top-down approach. They look at the policies, they then try to define processes, and from those processes they define security control, security measures, most of the time in a very generic way. And that cycle of improvement, continuous improvement, is a long cycle, sometimes a year or maybe even longer. And that means that there is not much opportunity to feedback improvements on a shorter notice. So what we encountered is that things are moving too slow, and they're only moving in one way to be able to support the agile development approach. As I said, there is, if you look at the control set in ISO 27002, it's a very good set. It covers a lot of domains, but it's still a very generic set. Everybody has to translate all those generic controls into context-specific implementations. And in an agile project, there is not much time available to make a implementation or translate those generic controls into specific implementations, and hence everybody has to reinvent the wheel over and over again, which leads to situations in which you do implement a security control, but you're not sure if it's really effective, if it's really protecting the assets that you are trying to protect. So there is a lack of detail that you need in an agile development that is lacking from the frameworks that we are used to and that we are used to using. And in some cases, and that's something I spoke about with Pascal this morning, there are too many people still using checklists when implementing security, and we are, as we say, from the checklist prevention brigade, we are trying to get rid of all those checklists that have no context and insufficient detail, and try to refocus on doing proper risk assessment, risk analyses, to make sure that you are addressing the issues that need to be addressed. So that's the things that we had to encounter, that we had to work with during all those different Agile projects. And as I said, the context in which you are operating, in which you are delivering your security controls and your security solutions or your security architecture, that is very important. It's just how you look at it that determines what is the best solution. And I think this was a very good picture that describes that it's all about your point of view and the information that you get to make sure that you get the proper context. So everybody is looking at it from a different angle, but nobody sees that it's really an elephant that is in the room. And what we encountered as well, and that is, even if the waterfall model is a top-down approach, that at the end of the whole waterfall there still needs to be some information security controls fitted as a band-aid onto the project. And that means that it's always an afterthought, or not always, but it's, in some cases it's an afterthought that does not always have the most effective solution or provides the most effective solution to fixing your security requirements. I think everybody can recognize, or maybe has some experience with projects that forgot some security controls that need to be retrofitted almost at the end when everything else was already written in stone and fixed, and there was not enough time available to do it properly. Well, the Agile approach of doing systems and application development does it differently. There are many ways of doing Agile. There is the Kanban approach. There is also the extreme programming approach. Well, in most of the approach you are continuously doing, or you're continuously making choices what to develop or what to postpone or what to forget about the features that you had designed at the beginning. And it's all based on managing your project risks. So you want to make sure that you deliver your deliverables on time and with the functionality that you have agreed upon, and in what steps you do it is depending on the choices you have to make related to the risks of developing specific features or specific functionality. And the only thing that really works apparently is by dividing all those steps into small chunks, small steps that are manageable by people within the project. So sometimes it's only a 2-week or a 3-week cycle, or maybe even shorter, that you have for developing a predefined or agreed upon functions and features that you have to develop. And there is always some sort of definition of done at the end of a cycle that says, well, if these features are implemented and they work, then this cycle is done and then we can move on to the next cycle. So it's a very short cycle time in which you have to develop your features, and they use a mixture more or less from top down and bottom up. They can define a number of building blocks at the beginning of a project, for instance in your project start architecture or your starting document or whatever you call it, that sets the goal that you are working towards, and you start by just building those basic building blocks. And by combining those building blocks you can create more functionality, more features, and enhance the set of building blocks as you go along on a demand basis. So if you don't need it in this cycle, don't build it, because you need your time to do other stuff. Things that is completely different or the opposite of the security framework approach. And as I said, it's all about very short and manageable time frames. So there is always the option to postponing specific features and functionality to a next cycle if it's too complicated to implement in this one. Or maybe you don't have the resources to implement it in this cycle. So you can always postpone it. So there is a very strict management of time within an Agile development project. And you get a lot of opportunity to learn from the things that you did in a previous cycle and feed back and feed forward that information and use it to continuously improve within the Agile process the quality of the features, the quality of your deliverables. So there's a very short cycle time as well, and results from one cycle are used in the next or even the next one cycle after that one to make sure that you do some sort of continuous improvement. So those are the things that really I think are really marks of an Agile approach. And if you are familiar with things like ISO 27001, you will see that there is a misalignment between that short risk-driven approach within Agile and the more classical approach in the frameworks. They use a top-down approach, they have a long cycle time, and there are limited opportunities to implement the feedback. Only if the whole cycle has been finished, then you can implement the results from the previous one. So there's a misalignment, and we had to struggle in a number of projects on how to make sure that information security was addressed in a proper way. And we ran into a number of assumptions. Those assumptions are made by information security or security management, if you want to, whatever you want to call it, about the people that are working in an Agile project and also the way an Agile project works. What we encountered was that security management assumes that the Agile project is capable of translating their generic security requirements to specific controls that they implement during one of those cycles. That is an assumption that turned out to be a false assumption. Because the Agile team has other priorities. They need to build building blocks, they need to build functionality, they need to build features. And they don't have an unlimited set of people and resources and tools available to do that. So they have to work in small teams, sometimes 3, sometimes 7 people, but it's not a very big team, so they have to manage their resources in a very effective way. And at the end, the Agile team has a very strict timeline as well. They need to adhere to those 2 or 3 week cycle times, which means that they always have to make choices what to implement and what to postpone. And I think you can guess what will be postponed first if they don't have enough time to implement everything. And that is also the things that we encountered, that information security implementing controls is often considered boring by the guys who have to write the code and those who have to do the development. There is some sort of culture clash between both sides, and infosec looks at development as they just write lines of code and they don't know what they do about security. They have short deadlines and they always reuse the same code over and over again. So that's the way infosec looks at development, and it's also the other way around. Developers think, well, infosec, they want us to implement boring controls. They make our daily job much more difficult than we need. They're always paranoid, and they don't know the business. They don't know what we are doing for the business. So that is really a culture clash between information security and development, and you run into those culture clashes if you during that Agile development project. Information security also assumes that the Agile team has the skills and the expertise and the knowledge to build a secure solution, overall secure solution. They assume that they know how to prevent buffer overflows and how to prevent cross-site scripting or SQL injection. Well, it turns out that a lot of time people within the Agile project don't have those experiences, they don't have the skills, and they don't have the expertise, just because they're only focused on building functionality. And the Agile team is not always even aware what the security requirements are for the solution that they are building. And if they do, they don't have the tools and methodologies available to implement those. So that last point, that is something where we hope we can help everybody in at least giving you some sort of tooling and some sort of checklist or some sort of approach to address those security requirements. Well, the third assumption that information of infosec or security management does is that they assume there is enough time and money available to perform separate security tests on a frozen version of the function or a frozen version of the deliverable, and then once the test has been finished, that there is enough time to implement all the recommendations and improve the security of the product. Well, it turns out that the continuous delivery model don't really have that clear test phases available within a cycle. There is a continuous unit testing and development steps going on, and if they are testing, it's always if it works as they intended to work. They don't do any security testing. And what's even worse, at the end of a cycle, it's not always clear what will be the object of development or the deliverable in the next cycle. So information security has to shoot at a moving target continuously, which is a very complicating factor for developing a test approach or doing pen testing. So those are things that hinder the testing part of your PDCA cycle, really. And the last assumption is that there is sufficient time and money to identify and address all of the security risks. What we normally do, what we are used to, is doing a very detailed risk assessment, address all the risks or identify all the risks, and then write a risk treatment plan for all the risks as a whole. But that time is not available, and the money is not available to do that within an agile development project. Again, because you have serious time constraints, you have to do a short cycle time. There are not enough people and resources available, and at the end of the day, it also turns out that development and information security don't speak the same language, and they still have that culture clash or that culture gap that they need to cover. Excuse me. So those are the things that make it difficult to address all the risks that have been identified. So those are the problems that we ran into during a lot of those agile projects. I would like to hand over to Pascal now, because he will take you through some of the solutions that we used to fix the assumptions and the problems that I mentioned in this part of the presentation. So Pascal, if you're ready.
Yes. Thank you, Arthur. So for solving the issues that Arthur has mentioned, we still try to follow the plan, do, check, act cycle of the security management process. And this is because most people working in that area are used to that process model. And so if we plot agile development in that model, what we see is that it fits in the do phase, there where you implement the measures, the security measures. So what we did was, in fact, keep this model, try to fit in agile development in the plan, do, check, act cycle, and then see what it means for the way of working within security management. Next slide, please, Arthur. Yeah. So if we look at the plan step, it hasn't really changed. I mean, the strategic security plan is still the same. It's still supporting the same business processes, and you still define the same security objectives or control objectives. This has not changed. Next one, please. Well, of course, there's a lot of change in the do step. This is where agile development does its thing, and this is where the assumptions have changed as well. So the first assumption was about translating the generic security requirements to specific security measures. This knowledge is not available in the Agile teams. So a security domain expert needs to be part of the Agile development team and help them do that translation. And what we saw was that it would be very valuable to be able to give people some reference scheme, for example a classification scheme that helps to lead from security objectives to the measures to take. We can also imagine that the classification scheme might lead to a security baseline that one would provide to the teams, but still, so the classification scheme and the baseline are just a way of automating the security knowledge in the Agile development team. There's also the lack of expertise to implement proper security or to implement proper security measures. And what we see is that it helps tremendously if you're able to provide existing security solutions and just ask the team to implement those. For example, if proper authentication is needed, you can have the Agile development team develop its own authentication service, but you can also tell them that there is already a good existing authentication service which they only need to implement. And this speeds up the development process enormously, whilst it makes sure that they are implementing security components that are already tested, already known to be secure. So it lowers the need for security testing on that aspect. The only thing that you need to test is later on whether they implemented this existing security building block. And you can imagine that you could define several of those building blocks and ask the teams to implement those. Next slide, please. So this is a visualization of these security building blocks that you could provide. On the left hand side you see an IT architecture stack. This is ordered along the OC layers. We are looking now at the platform layer, and every circle in the platform layer represents a security building block that's already available, ready to be consumed by the Agile team. Those building blocks are detailed out on the right side. So that's authentication or authorization management or an SSL certificate. So this can be a process or a technical service, or it can be a template or a person, something that helps to improve security. The white building blocks are supposed to be implemented by the Agile team, where the gray building blocks are, let's say, secondary building blocks that are watching the white ones. So that's most of the time these are services that are executed by the security guys. And the white ones are to be implemented in the applications or systems. This is a way of visualizing what needs to be done, and also to lead people to the proper existing security building blocks. When it comes to checking, the first check you need to do is not about monitoring for security events. It's about monitoring whether the proper measures have been taken in the system that has been developed. As we see that the development times shorten, there's no time anymore to do conventional, traditional planning of penetration testing. In my company, it takes about 2 or 3 weeks to plan a penetration test, and that's exactly the cycle of a sprint. So you don't know in advance what is ready at that moment to be tested, and there's also no moment that the application is frozen and that there is time for a penetration test of several days and then time for the reporting, etc. within the same cycle. So what Arthur and I have seen is that if you're not able to plan penetration testing within the cycle of system development, we should let it. We should not try to match those processes of development and monitoring, but we should cut that loose and do continuous monitoring of what's there. And that's what we are saying here. We need to check what's there continuously, independently of the cycle of the development process. And one other thing that needs to be done is getting security checks automated within the standard automated testing process of the Agile development team. Every night they run their checks and check if every functional specification is still met. And what we need to do from a security perspective is automate our security checks and add them to that same set of checks that runs every night. So I think I already told most of this, but
I would like to add one thing, that during that continuous monitoring you will find deficiencies, but you can feed them back into the Agile development cycle to be fixed in one of those cycles. You don't have to wait until the whole project is finished to implement improvements or fix deficiencies, but you can feed that into that cycle, into one of those sprints during your development cycle. So you get a quicker fix really of some of the deficiencies you find during your continuous monitoring.
Yeah, so the mechanism for that is adding the security use case or abuse case or whatever you want to like it into the backlog of the Agile development team that makes sure that it gets the proper priority to get implemented in the next cycle. Well, then there's from the plan to check act cycle, we are now in the act phase. Next one, please, Arthur. Here's again the point of no time to fix security issues. Well, one way to fix it is, as Arthur just said, is feeding back directly to the backlog of the Agile development team. And the other one is the traditional way, feeding back to the strategic security cycle and making sure that the policies change or that things end up in the security plan for next year. But that's the slower path. It will make sure that on the long run improvements are made, but for the specific system that's being built, it's probably better to feed back directly to the Agile team. So concluding, we should not expect the development team to do security for us, but we should help them hands-on with making sure that security is addressed properly. We also need to provide a security catalog with reusable services and reusable patterns to facilitate the implementation of the proper security building blocks. So actually facilitating security instead of demanding that they choose and implement the proper security. Then there's the issue of continuous monitoring. We need to do that because we just can't keep up with our old way of working. And we need to accept that it's all risk-based in the end, and some business priorities might overrule your security priorities. That's the game. So be proactive and get embedded into an agile project from the start. And also we need the right people for this. We don't need the guy with the checklist, but we need someone who can stand in the mud with his feet and do things about security.
Yeah. I speak the language of developers because those are the people you're working with and talking to. There was even one of our customers said, well, I only accept security people in my project that also know how to write code. So that is a very good way of describing that you need the right people. And another customer did a very clever thing. They sent a lot of their developers on a sort of hacking training for 2 or 3 days to have them look at their code or look at software development from the security point of view, just to bridge the gap again between those two different cultures. So.
Yeah, and that was really an eye-opener to the team, to the team themselves, because they thought they knew about security, but once they went to this hacker training course, they came back and they said, I didn't know 10% of security. So that really helps to change the mindset of people and improve their knowledge. Yeah. One other interesting thing was a development team that said, well, we do want to perform risk assessments when starting. Well, we do want to do risk assessments every now and then. And I said, well, you mean every 3 weeks? No. Every 2 months? No. Once a year? Yes, that sounds reasonable. Once a year. So you see that the translation of risks to measures really needs to be done by a security person who is involved in that team in order to get it properly.
So that's really, this concludes our webinar, which will summarize at least the things that we encountered in a lot of our projects and how we found a way at least of fixing them and aligning them to the agile way of working. So if there are any questions, I think we have some time left to answer questions from the people from the audience.
Thank you, Arthur and Pascal, for your presentation. Yes, we have a few questions. I will read them and you can decide which one of you will answer to them, or you can make an interaction. So the first, I think the major things you have said and is included in this question, but I will just ask from you to stick to this question and just to try to explain a bit more. So the first one comes is that does the agile security approach affect the organizational roles if a company decides to adopt it? If yes, which can be the major organizational changes?
I think you have to make a distinction between the operational part and the development part or the project part. So I don't see any real major changes for the operational, the day-to-day operations, because then you still need the same people and the same processes in your operation. But for the development, the project part, you need different people. You need to have more technically sophisticated security people to embed them into the project. So for the operational part, I don't see major differences. You still need auditing and you still need a risk manager and all those things because that's your daily operations. But within the project environment, I see things changing. The classical security architect, which I find a very annoying term really, but that's my personal problem, and the classical security manager, I see that they are disappearing, and you need more and more security aware programmers or security people with a lot of coding experience, but also programmers and developers with a lot of security experience. So that's my take on the question. Pascal, what's your experience
I
in
can
this?
also envision a change of the role of penetration testers, because if we succeed in automating a lot of those checks, for example, a check on proper authorization models, or session management, or SQL injection possibilities, if we are able to automate that and integrate that into the test that's being done every night, what that will change the role of the penetration tester. Yeah.
Okay, the second question is, does Agile approach ensures that we can respond faster on any security incident?
If there is a security incident related to the stuff that the project is developing, yes, because you are doing continuous monitoring, continuous testing. So if you run into something, a deficiency or a weakness or a vulnerability, you can fix it quicker because your cycle time within Agile is shorter. So anything you find can be fixed in a shorter period of time or in one of the next cycles. Once you have moved the project, the deliverables over to operations, then in your daily operations, then the regular incident management still applies for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, you agree, Pascal?
Yeah, I think we're not there yet on the level of sophistication that the set of security building blocks will actually decrease the incident handling time. But maybe some years from now it will, but not where we are right now. No.
Exactly. Yeah, I agree.
Okay, and the last question is, what if company switches on Agile security? Is there a need to perform a follow-up steps, such as information security risk assessment, etc.?
Yeah, you have to focus more, I believe, on a number of things. You have to adapt proper risk assessment methodologies that fit into the Agile model, and you need to make sure that you can select the proper focus and the proper context if you're doing it in the Agile environment. Pascal,
What we are doing right now at one organization is trying to make the risk assessment as easy as possible by using a classification model, and we pre-classified the whole IT environment by defining enclaves. An enclave is a group of similar systems or systems in a similar part of the network that have more or less the same security requirements and the same vulnerability or attack surface. So with this enclave model, we make classification really easy because it's already has a security classification, and then we tied the classification to the set of building blocks, security building blocks to implement. So for some of the basic security measures, you could do that and make the risk assessment easy and quick.
Yeah, and once you have built that catalog of secure building blocks, then your incidents should decrease because you are using secure building blocks to build secure solutions. So that would be an ideal position to be in 1 or 2 years' time. So it would everybody within the organization would benefit if while doing an Agile project you develop some building blocks to manage them from a sort of security catalog, repository, and make sure that they fill in your requirements. But if you're using secure building blocks, then that should, in the longer run, reduce the number of security incidents because you are using predefined and pre-tested and pre-assured building blocks.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, thank you Arthur and Pascal for sharing this highly informative presentation. I believe the attendees had the chance to learn new things today, and I suggest you to take time and see our future webinars that we will be hosting. Next Wednesday we will host a webinar topic which is called 16 Steps in the ISO 27001 Implementation. You can also take time and visit our website www.pcb.com on the webinar section to register for our future webinars. Thank you once again and hope to meet you soon in our future webinars.
Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.